his thumb pressed against my racing pulse, measuring my fear like vintage wine. "Good girl," the Duke whispered, his breath hot against my ear in the museum's shadowed corridor. "You scare beautifully." I destroyed a painting worth £750,000, knocked it clean off the wall in front of London's elite. Now this man, this predator in a midnight suit with eyes like frozen steel, was saving me from criminal charges. But the card he pressed into my trembling hand held only an address, and his final words made my stomach drop. "Tomorrow, 3 p.m. Don't make me wait, or I'll let them prosecute you for every penny." That's how I met Alexander Thorne, the 12th Duke of Ravenshurst. That's how my nightmare began. That's how I almost lost myself completely. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the beginning, to the moment everything shattered. The museum's grand hall gleamed like something from a period drama. Vaulted ceilings soared above marble floors, and Renaissance paintings glowed under perfectly aimed spotlights. Champagne flowed. Diamonds caught the light. I didn't belong here. My rental dress itched at the seams. My borrowed clutch felt cheap in my sweating palms. I was a scholarship student from Detroit, studying art restoration at King's College, invited only because my scathing article about the museum's colonial theft problem had gone viral in The Guardian. They probably thought bringing me here would shut me up. I was studying a Turner landscape, genuinely beautiful, probably stolen from some colonized country, when chaos erupted behind me. A waiter stumbled, his tray of champagne glasses tilting like a sinking ship. I lurched backward to avoid the spray. My elbow connected with something solid. Then came the sound I'll never forget, the whisper of canvas tearing, the crash of a gilded frame hitting marble, the collective gasp of 200 wealthy people watching disaster unfold. I spun around. A 17th century portrait, some pale noblewoman in pearls, lay on the floor, its canvas ripped diagonally across her face. The frame had splintered. My heart stopped. Silence spread through the room like blood in water. Security guards materialized from nowhere, moving toward me with grim purpose. My visa, my degree, my entire future flashed before my eyes. I couldn't afford a lawyer. I couldn't afford anything. Then a voice cut through the whispers, deep, controlled, absolute. "Leave her." The crowd parted like the Red Sea. He walked toward me with the grace of a panther stalking wounded prey. Tall, maybe 6'3", with silver threading through his dark hair at the temples. His suit probably cost more than my entire year's tuition. But his eyes, God, his eyes were what froze me in place, cold, calculating, hungry. "The frame was unstable," he announced to the room, never breaking eye contact with me. "I've been meaning to have it reinforced. The fault is mine." He stopped inches away, so close I could smell his cologne, something expensive and dark, like leather and smoke. His gaze traveled down my body, not sexually, but like a surgeon planning an incision. When he reached my trembling hands, something flickered across his face. Satisfaction. "You're the American student," he said. Not a question, a statement of fact that told me he already knew everything about me. "The one who wrote that passionate critique of our acquisitions policy." My mouth opened. No sound came out. Terror had stolen my voice. He leaned closer, and my entire body locked up. When he spoke again, his voice dropped to gravel, meant only for me. "West Corridor, 5 minutes. Don't make me wait." Then he turned and walked away, the crowd swallowing him like water closing over a stone. I stood there, shaking, while museum staff carefully lifted the damaged painting. A woman in pearls whispered to her companion, "That's the Duke of Ravenshurst. He owns half of Sussex. His wife drowned 3 years ago. Very mysterious." Another voice, "I heard he's been alone ever since. Hasn't touched a woman. Maybe he's finally moving on." The speculative looks they gave me made my skin crawl. 5 minutes later, I found myself in the West Corridor, a long hallway lined with Greek sculptures. He was waiting, leaning against a marble column like he'd been carved from the same stone. He held out a card, heavy stock, cream-colored, with an address embossed in gold. No name, no explanation. "Tomorrow," he said, 3 p.m. "I don't understand." "Yes, you do." His smile was sharp enough to draw blood. "You damaged my property. Either you meet me to discuss restitution, or I notify the authorities that I've reconsidered my generous offer to take responsibility." He paused, letting that sink in. "They'll prosecute. You'll be deported. Your scholarship will evaporate. Your future will end before it begins." "That's blackmail," I whispered. "That's reality." He reached out and I flinched, but he caught my wrist anyway. Gentle, controlled, terrifying. His thumb found my pulse point, pressing down just enough to feel my heart hammering against his skin. His eyes half closed like he was savoring something exquisite. "Your pulse is 120, maybe 130. You're terrified. That's good. Fear means you understand the stakes." He released me, but the ghost of his touch burned like a brand. "Tomorrow, Miss Adebayo, don't disappoint me." He walked away, leaving me alone with Greek statues and the overwhelming certainty that I'd just made a deal with the devil. I didn't sleep. How could I? My flatmate Jenny, a cheerful British girl studying economics, made tea while I obsessively Googled him on my laptop. The screen glowed in our cramped studio apartment, casting shadows across stacks of art history books and second-hand furniture. Alexander Thorne, 12th Duke of Ravenshurst, 42 years old, educated at Oxford and Cambridge, owned a pharmaceutical empire worth billions, plus ancestral estates, across southern England, sat on the boards of museums, hospitals, conservation societies, donated generously to progressive causes, which made him a media darling despite his title. Then I found the darker stories. His wife, Caroline Thorne née Westbrook, had drowned in the estate's lake 3 years ago. The coroner ruled it accidental. She'd been drinking, went for a late-night swim, possibly had a seizure. But the tabloids had whispered. There'd been bruises on her body. She'd lost 30 pounds in the months before her death. Friends reported she'd become withdrawn, frightened. The investigation cleared him. No evidence of foul play, just a tragic accident and a grieving widower. But the photos told a different story. In early pictures, Caroline glowed, blonde, beautiful, laughing at garden parties. In later ones, she looked hollowed out, her smile brittle, her eyes dead. In the last photo before her death, taken at a Christmas charity event, she wore long sleeves despite the indoor heat, and she stood a careful distance from her husband, like a rabbit near a snake. "This is insane," Jenny said, reading over my shoulder. "You can't go." "If I don't, I'll be arrested." "He won't actually press charges. It's a power play." "Can I afford to gamble on that?" I closed the laptop, exhaustion making my eyes burn. "My visa expires in 3 months. One criminal charge and I'm deported. Everything I've worked for, gone." Jenny bit her lip. She came from money, had safety nets I couldn't imagine. "Rich men don't save poor girls without expecting payment." "I know." "Kalila." "I know," I repeated, harder this time. "But what choice do I have?" At 1 p.m., I boarded the train to Sussex, watching London's sprawl give way to green countryside. I dressed carefully, jeans, a modest blouse, flats, nothing that could be misinterpreted. I'd tucked pepper spray in my bag, told Jenny to call the police if I wasn't back by midnight, left a note with his address. All the precautions women learn to take, as if they'd be enough. The estate emerged from fog like something from a Gothic novel. The mansion sprawled across a hillside, all gray stone and tall windows, with ivy climbing the walls and gargoyles perched on the parapets like frozen sentinels. Manicured gardens surrounded it, but beyond the perfect lawns, I could see sections gone wild, overgrown hedges, tangled roses, a darkness the landscapers hadn't tamed. The taxi drove up a long gravel drive lined with ancient oaks. Their branches formed a tunnel, blocking out the late afternoon sun. By the time we reached the entrance, my stomach was in knots. I paid the driver, probably too much, but I needed to feel like I had an escape route, and climbed the stone steps to massive wooden doors. Before I could knock, one swung open. A woman in her 60s, stern-faced and dressed in black, looked me up and down. "Miss Adebayo, His Grace is expecting you. Follow me." Not welcome or please come in, just cold. Efficiency. The housekeeper, I never learned her name, led me through rooms that made my breath catch despite my fear. Vaulted ceilings with medieval beams, portraits of ancestors in ruffs and military uniforms, but mixed with the history, modern sculptures, abstract paintings, glass furniture that caught and reflected light. It was like 2 centuries fighting for dominance in the same space. Persian rugs covered stone floors. A Monet hung beside an African textile piece. Everything whispered wealth so old and deep it didn't need to announce itself. We walked forever, through halls, up staircases, past locked doors, until we reached a conservatory at the back of the house. Glass walls revealed gardens stretching toward distant woods, and beyond them I glimpsed water. The lake where his wife had died. He stood with his back to me, silhouetted against the dying sunlight, swirling brandy in a crystal glass. He didn't turn when we entered. "That will be all, Mrs. Brennan," he said. The housekeeper's footsteps faded. The door closed with a soft click that sounded like a cell locking. Silence stretched. I counted my heartbeats, 20, 30, 40, before he finally turned. In the museum, he'd been devastating. Here, in his own domain, he was something else entirely. The light behind him made his features hard to read, kept him half in shadow, while I stood fully exposed in the conservatory's brightness. "You came," he said. "You didn't give me a choice." "There's always a choice." His smile was slight, controlled. "You chose survival. I respect that." He gestured to a leather chair across from his, but I remained standing. His eyebrow lifted. "Defiance. Even better. What do you want from me?" He moved then, crossing the space between us with fluid grace, and suddenly he was close, too close, invading my personal space with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no. He smelled like expensive cologne and danger. "Here's what will happen," he said, his voice low and measured. "You'll stay here for 2 weeks. I have restoration materials, professional grade, anything you need. You'll repair the painting you damaged. If you succeed, we're even. Your debt is cleared." He paused, and his gaze traveled down my body again, that same surgical assessment. "If you fail..." "What?" My voice came out steadier than I felt. "What happens if I fail?" "We'll discuss alternative arrangements." His hand rose and I flinched, but he only tucked a loose curl behind my ear, his fingers barely grazing my skin. The touch was gentle. It was also a threat. "Don't look so frightened, Miss Adebayo. I'm offering you an opportunity to fix your mistake. 2 weeks of work in exchange for absolution. It's generous, really." "Why?" The question burst out before I could stop it. "You're rich enough to buy a dozen paintings. Why go through this elaborate setup?" Something flickered in his eyes. Approval, amusement. "Because watching you work will be interesting. Because I'm curious what you're capable of when properly motivated. Because..." He leaned closer, his breath warm against my ear. "Because I haven't been interested in anything for 3 years, and then you stumbled into my life looking terrified and beautiful, and I thought, perhaps..." "Perhaps what?" "Perhaps you'll survive me." He straightened, stepped back, giving me space that felt calculated rather than kind. "Mrs. Brennan will show you to your room. Dinner is at 8. Don't be late." I turned to leave, desperate to escape his presence, to breathe air that wasn't thick with tension. "Oh, and Miss Adebayo?" I stopped, didn't turn around. "The East Wing is locked. Don't attempt to enter it. Curiosity is a sin I don't forgive." The warning hung in the air like a noose. I nodded, not trusting my voice, and fled. I woke to silence so complete it felt like being buried alive. No traffic sounds, no neighbor's music, no Jenny chattering about her day. Just the old house settling around me, wood creaking, wind whispering at windows. My room was beautiful and impersonal, a 4-poster bed with heavy curtains, antique furniture that probably belonged in a museum, and windows overlooking the gardens. I'd barely slept, too aware that he was somewhere in this massive house, too conscious of the locked East Wing and what secrets it held. At 6 a.m. I heard a soft knock. When I opened the door, no one was there, just a breakfast tray on the floor. Perfectly plated, fresh fruit, toast with butter and jam, coffee that smelled like heaven. No note, no explanation. He'd known I'd wake early, had probably heard me pacing all night. I ate quickly, dressed in the same clothes as yesterday, and went searching for the studio Mrs. Brennan had mentioned. The house was a maze, every corridor looking identical, but eventually I found it. A converted ballroom on the south side, flooded with northern light from skylights. He was already there, leaning against a workbench, reading a book like he'd been waiting hours. He glanced up when I entered, and his gaze traveled over me slowly enough to make my skin prickle. You slept poorly, he observed. I could hear you pacing. My cheeks burned. The floorboards creak. Everything in this house creaks. It's 300 years old. He set down his book, Baudelaire's Les Fleurs du Mal in French, and approached the easel where the damaged painting waited. Come here. It wasn't a request. I crossed the room, maintaining careful distance, and examined the tear. It was bad. A diagonal slash across the noblewoman's face and bodice, canvas separated, paint flaking at the edges. Repairing it would require careful cleaning, stabilization, filling, inpainting, and varnishing. Weeks of work. Maybe months. 2 weeks, he said, reading my expression. That's all you have. That's impossible. Then you'll have to be efficient. He moved behind me, close enough that I could feel his body heat through my blouse. Let me see. Your hands. I held them out, trying to stop them from shaking. He took my right hand in both of his, examining my fingers like a fortune teller reading palms, the calluses from years of work, the paint permanently embedded under my nails, the slight tremor I couldn't control. You're frightened, he murmured. That's good. Fear sharpens focus. His thumb pressed into the center of my palm, finding pressure points, and I gasped. But you can't work like this. Too tense. You'll make mistakes. Before I could respond, he stepped even closer, his chest against my back, and covered my hand with his. He guided it to the damaged canvas, teaching me the pressure needed, light, controlled, precise. Feel that? His voice was low, intimate, his breath against my neck. That's the difference between restoration and destruction. Too hard and you damage further, too soft and nothing changes. His other hand settled on my hip, anchoring me in place. You need to find the perfect balance between force and gentleness. We stood like that for an eternity or a moment, I couldn't tell, his body wrapped around mine, his hands teaching mine, while my heart tried to pound its way out of my chest. Then he released me and stepped away, leaving me cold. Begin, he commanded. I'll observe. He was everywhere. That's what terrified me most about the first week. Not that he was dangerous, but that he was inescapable. Every time I turned a corner, he was there, reading in the library when I sought distraction, standing at windows when I took evening walks, behind me in doorways when I suddenly turned, never touching, never threatening, just present. On the third day, I was returning from lunch, another beautiful meal left outside my door, another ghost service, when I found him blocking the hallway. He stood perfectly still, perfectly positioned so I'd have to either squeeze past him or retreat. Your posture is terrible, he observed. I stopped, confused. Excuse me? Art restoration requires discipline, physical discipline. He approached with that predatory grace, circling me like I was a sculpture he was evaluating. You hunch, you compress yourself, you take up as little space as possible. He stopped behind me. Why? I don't. Stand straight. His hand touched my lower back and I froze. His palm was warm through my thin shirt, his fingers splayed across my spine. Slowly, methodically, he traced up my vertebrae, one by one, from tailbone to skull, adjusting my posture with clinical precision. There, he said softly. That's better. You have a beautiful spine, Miss Adebayo. Stop hiding it. The touch was professional. It was also the most intimate thing I'd experienced in months. When he removed his hand, I felt branded. Better, he repeated. Now walk. I walked, hyper-aware of my straightened shoulders, my lifted chin, my exposed throat. When I reached the end of the hallway and glanced back, he was watching with an expression I couldn't name. Satisfaction, maybe. Or hunger. On the 5th day, he caught me in the conservatory during a thunderstorm. I'd been watching rain hammer the glass, thinking about home, about Detroit and my family and everything I'd left behind to chase this dream. Homesick? He asked, materializing from shadow. Startled, I clutched my chest. Do you enjoy sneaking up on people? I didn't sneak. You were lost in thought. He joined me at the window, close enough that our reflections overlapped in the glass. Where are you from? You already know. You knew before the museum. I know the facts. I don't know the story. He turned to face me while I stayed focused on the storm. Tell me about Detroit, about your family, about what brought you here. It felt like a trap, but I was so tired of silence, of eating alone, of working in that beautiful studio with only my thoughts for company. So I told him. About growing up in a house full of women, mother, grandmother, 3 aunts, cousins piled in bedrooms like sardines. About learning early that beauty meant danger, that taking up space meant punishment, that survival meant making yourself small and quiet and grateful. About discovering art in a public library, losing myself in books about the Renaissance, the Harlem Renaissance, Kehinde Wiley and Carrie James Marshall. About my art teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, who'd submitted my work to scholarship competitions without telling me, who'd believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. About winning a full scholarship to King's College, about my family's pride and terror, about arriving in London and realizing I was drowning in whiteness and wealth and casual cruelty disguised as sophistication. "And now you're here," he said when I finished, "in another white man's house, feeling small again." The accuracy hurt. "Yes." "Good." I turned to him angry. "Good. Awareness is the first step toward change." His hand rose, and this time I didn't flinch when he cupped my jaw, tilting my face toward his. "You make yourself small because the world punished you for being magnificent. But I'm not the world, Miss Adebayo. In this house, you can be as large as you dare." His thumb traced my lower lip, barely touching, sending electricity down my spine. "That's manipulation," I whispered. "Yes," he agreed. "Does that change how it makes you feel?" It didn't. That was the terrifying part. On the 7th night, I couldn't sleep. Again. The house was too quiet, my thoughts too loud, and the painting was progressing slower than needed. I'd cleaned the damaged area, stabilized the canvas, mixed pigments to match the original, but the actual restoration work stretched ahead like a mountain. I wandered to the library, 3 stories of books in dark wood with rolling ladders and a fireplace crackling with fresh logs. Someone had lit it recently. For me? For himself? He sat in a leather chair, illuminated by fire and a single reading lamp, dressed in casual clothes for the first time. Dark jeans, a gray sweater. He looked younger, more human, more dangerous. "Can't sleep?" he asked without looking up from his book. "I didn't mean to intrude." "You're not intruding." He closed the book, still Baudelaire, and set it aside. "I've been waiting." "For what?" "For you to stop pretending you're here against your will." The words hit like a physical blow. I opened my mouth to protest, to defend myself, but he continued. "You could have left days ago, Miss Adebayo. I'm not keeping you prisoner. The door's unlocked. You have your phone. Mrs. Brennan would call you a taxi if you asked." He stood, approached with terrifying calm. "But you're still here. Still restoring a painting you know I don't actually care about. Still eating the meals I send. Still accepting my guidance. Because you'll press charges." "No." He stopped inches away. "We both know I won't. That threat expired the moment you arrived. You're here because you're curious. Because some part of you wants to see where this leads. That's insane." "Is it?" He circled me slowly, like before, but this time the energy was different, predatory but honest. "You're brilliant, Kalila. I can call you Kalila, yes?" He didn't wait for permission. "You've survived systems designed to crush women like you. You've crossed an ocean to claim space in institutions that don't want you, that requires courage, ambition, and a darkness you've spent your whole life denying. You don't know anything about me. I know you wrote that article about colonial theft because you understand power, how it's taken, how it's kept, how it corrupts." He stopped in front of me. "I know you felt something when I grabbed your wrist at the museum, not just fear, excitement. That's true." His voice dropped to a whisper. "I've been watching you all week. The way you lean toward me when I correct your technique, the way your breathing changes when I enter a room, the way you've started wearing your hair down, stopped hunching, started taking up space." He leaned closer, not touching, just invading my air. "You're testing your own boundaries, seeing how much intensity you can handle. I should have been outraged, should have slapped him, should have walked out. Instead, I asked the question I'd been carrying for 7 days. What do you want from me?" His smile was devastating. "Everything. Your fear, your pride, your resistance. I want to see what you become when you stop making yourself small." I want to know if you're strong enough to survive proximity to me without shattering. Like your wife did. The air froze. For a long moment he didn't move. Then he stepped back and his expression shifted. Something cracked through the controlled facade. Pain. Real, raw, human pain. Yes, he said quietly. Like Caroline did. She wasn't strong enough. I thought I could save her. Instead, I broke her. And you think I'm different? I know you're different. Caroline was already damaged when I found her. Depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation. She came to me seeking oblivion, and I gave it to her. His voice was clinical, detached, like he was describing someone else's crime. You're damaged differently. You've been compressed, not shattered. There's a difference. You're insane. Probably. He moved to the fireplace, staring into flames. My therapist thinks so. She's suggested medication, inpatient treatment, a dozen different diagnoses that all boil down to the same thing. I'm fundamentally broken. Then why? Because I've spent 3 years in self-imposed isolation, convinced I was too dangerous to touch another human being. And then you crashed into my life, literally, looking at me with terror and fascination, and I thought, he turned back to me. Maybe she can handle it. Maybe she's strong enough. The vulnerability was more frightening than the threats. This isn't healthy, I said. Whatever this is, whatever you think is happening between us. I know. I should leave. You should. He crossed back to me, slow and deliberate. But you won't. Because you felt it too, Kalila. That pull. That dangerous curiosity about your own capacity for darkness. His hand rose, and this time when he touched me, fingers sliding along my jaw, thumb pressing against my racing pulse. I didn't move away. Stay, he whispered. Just 1 more week. Let me show you who you could become. I should have said no, should have walked out, should have called Jenny, called the police, called anyone. Instead, I heard myself whisper, 1 more week. His smile was triumph and tragedy combined. Good girl. The door was open. For 10 days, the East Wing had been locked, forbidden, a mystery I'd forced myself not to think about. But on the 11th night, as I returned from another sleepless walk through the gardens, I found it standing ajar. Invitation or accident, I'd never know for sure. But curiosity, that thing he'd been cultivating, feeding, weaponizing, pulled me through. The East Wing was colder than the rest of the house, older. The carpet was different, the wallpaper faded, and dust lay thick on everything despite Mrs. Brennan's ruthless efficiency elsewhere. Portraits lined the walls, all of the same woman, blonde, beautiful, ethereal, Caroline. I walked slowly, studying each image. In early portraits she glowed with genuine joy, laughing in a garden, riding a horse, dancing at a ball. But as I progressed down the hallway, the light in her eyes dimmed. Her smile became brittle. Her body language changed from open to closed, from confident to compressed. The last portrait showed her at what must have been a Christmas event, wearing a high-necked red dress despite the indoor setting. Her eyes were hollow. Her face was gaunt. She looked like a beautiful ghost, haunting her own life. I reached a door at the end of the hallway, unlocked like the wing itself, and pushed it open. Her bedroom. Everything was preserved exactly as she'd left it. A book on the nightstand, reading glasses beside it, clothes in the closet, jewelry in boxes, perfume bottles on the vanity. But no dust here. Someone cleaned this room regularly, maintained it like a shrine. On the bed lay a wedding dress in a glass case, pristine white silk that had never touched a body since hers. And on the walls, more photographs, hundreds of them. Caroline at various events, always beautiful, increasingly fragile, and in many of them, visible if you looked carefully, bruises on her arms, her collarbone, her wrists. I felt sick. On the nightstand, I saw it. A leather journal open to the last entry. My hands shook as I picked it up, knowing I shouldn't read it, unable to stop myself. The handwriting was elegant, shaky. March 15th. He doesn't love me. I've finally accepted that. He loves what he can make me feel, the fear, the submission, the complete dissolution of self. Today he told me that fear is the purest form of intimacy, that true connection requires one person to completely surrender to another. I'm starting to believe him. That's what terrifies me most. Not that he's hurting me, but that I'm starting to need the hurt, that I can't remember who I was before him, that when I look in mirrors, I see his version of me, not the woman I used to be. Mother called yesterday. I almost told her everything. But what would I say? That I chose this? That I walk toward the pain now instead of running? That some part of me wants to disappear completely into his darkness? The lake looks peaceful today. Sometimes I stand at its edge and think how easy it would be to walk in and never walk out, to let the water take me the way he's taken everything else. Maybe tomorrow I'll be brave enough. The entry was dated 3 days before she died. I told you the East Wing was forbidden. His voice behind me should have made me scream. Instead, I just closed the journal carefully, set it back on the nightstand, and turned to face him. He stood in the doorway, perfectly calm, dressed in dark clothes that made him look like part of the shadows. His expression was unreadable. "Did you kill her?" I asked, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. "No." "Did you hurt her?" "Yes." The honesty was worse than lies would have been. The bruises were from me, from sex, from punishment, from 1,000 moments where I pushed her boundaries because she asked me to, begged me to, needed me to. He entered the room and I backed against the vanity, trapped. The coroner ruled her death accidental. The police investigated and found no evidence of murder, but we both know the truth, don't we? You drove her to suicide. Yes. He stopped in front of me, close enough that I could see his eyes, and for the first time, I saw genuine pain there. I broke her. Systematically, deliberately, with her full consent. She came to me damaged, seeking someone to finish the destruction. I obliged. And now you want to do the same to me. No, his hand rose, cupped my face, and I was too shocked to move. Now I want to see if you're stronger than she was, if you can dance with darkness without being consumed by it. I slapped him. The crack echoed through the dead woman's bedroom. His head snapped to the side, and for a moment neither of us moved. Then he smiled, not angry, but delighted. "There it is," he murmured. "The fight she never had, the strength she couldn't find." He touched his reddening cheek almost tenderly. "You're not Caroline, Kalila. You're something much more dangerous." "I'm leaving." I pushed past him, heading for the door. "Tonight, right now. I don't care about the painting or the charges or any of it. I'm not staying in this house with you for one more second." "Wait." Something in his voice made me stop. Not command, not manipulation, just honesty. "Please," he added. "Let me explain." "Explain what? How you're a monster? I figured that out myself, thanks." "Let me explain why I let you find this room, why I left the door open." He moved closer but didn't touch me. "Because you needed to know the truth, what I am, what I'm capable of, what happened to the last woman who trusted me. So I'd run. So you'd make an informed choice." His voice cracked slightly. "Caroline never had that. She was too broken to see clearly, too desperate to protect herself. But you're clear-eyed, Kalila. You see the danger, and you get to decide whether it's worth exploring." "It's not." "Good." He stepped aside, clearing the path to the door. "Then go. Leave tonight. I'll have Mrs. Brennan call you a taxi. I'll never contact you again. You win." I should have walked out immediately, should have run. But something made me pause. "Do you regret her?" I asked. "Caroline, do you regret what you did?" His answer was immediate. "Every day, every single day for 3 years, she haunts me, not as a ghost, but as proof of my capacity for destruction. I told you I've been in therapy. What I didn't mention is that I'm trying to understand whether I'm capable of connection without annihilation, whether I can care about someone without consuming them. And am I your experiment? No, you're my test case." He met my eyes. "If you stay, if you choose this, then I'll know it's possible to be who I am without destroying someone. If you leave, I'll know I'm too dangerous to ever try again." The weight of that responsibility was crushing. "That's not fair," I whispered, "putting that on me, making me responsible for your redemption." "You're right. It's not fair." He moved to Caroline's journal, picked it up, held it out to me. "Take this. Read all of it. Learn what I did to her, every manipulation, every calculated cruelty, every boundary I destroyed. Then, decide. I took the journal with trembling hands. "I'll give you until morning," he said. "If you're still here at breakfast, we'll continue. If you're gone, I'll understand." He left, closing the door softly behind him. I stood alone in his dead wife's bedroom, holding her final confession, and tried to figure out which choice would destroy me less. I stayed. I'm still not sure why. Maybe because running felt like letting him win. Maybe because some sick part of me needed to see how dark things could get. Maybe because I was already more damaged than I wanted to admit. I read Caroline's journal all night, every entry, every description of their relationship's descent. It was horrifying. It was also, and I hate myself for this, intoxicating. She'd been a willing participant in her own destruction, had craved the intensity he offered, had chosen psychological dissolution over boring safety again and again, until she couldn't choose anything anymore. The morning I was supposed to leave, I went to breakfast instead. He was waiting in the dining room, and his expression when he saw me was complex: relief, concern, triumph, regret, all mixed together. "I thought you'd gone," he said quietly. "I'm still deciding." Fair enough. We ate in silence. Then he made his announcement. "I'm hosting a dinner party tonight. You'll attend." "Why?" "Because you need to see me in my world, meet the people who knew Caroline, understand the context of what I am." It felt like another test. Maybe it was. That evening, Mrs. Brennan delivered a garment bag to my room. Inside, a black silk evening gown, designer label, exactly my size. "From Her Grace's wardrobe," Mrs. Brennan said, her face carefully neutral. "His Grace selected it for you." The dress fit perfectly, because of course it did. He'd been studying my body for nearly 2 weeks. I looked at myself in the mirror, expensive fabric, flawless fit, the ghost of a dead woman clothing me, and felt like I was being erased, but I wore it anyway. The dinner party was torture disguised as sophistication. 10 guests, aristocrats and old money, titles and inherited wealth, people who'd known Caroline, known her family, watched her decline, and done nothing. They looked at me like I was a curiosity, or a replacement, or prey. Lady Ashford, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s with perfect pearls and vicious manners, took the seat beside me. "You're the American, the art student." "Yes, ma'am." "How enterprising of you." Her smile was razor thin. "Landing yourself in the Duke's home. Caroline was quite talented too, you know, painter, before she paused delicately, before her accident." Across the table, Alexander watched me with those cold eyes, making no move to intervene. Lord Pemberton, drunk on expensive wine, leaned across his plate. "Tell me, Miss Adebayo, was it? Are you enjoying your stay? The Duke has such particular tastes in house guests." Laughter rippled around the table, cruel, knowing laughter. I gripped my fork until my knuckles went white. "Enough," Alexander said quietly, and the table fell silent. His voice carried absolute authority. "Miss Adebayo is my guest and will be treated with respect." But the damage was done. They'd made their point. I was the latest in a pattern, Caroline's replacement, another woman stupid enough to enter his orbit. During the meal, I felt his hand slide onto my thigh under the tablecloth, possessive, claiming, making sure everyone saw my reaction, marking me as his in front of witnesses. I wanted to push him away. Instead, my body betrayed me, leaning infinitesimally closer. After dinner, while the men retired to the library for cigars and brandy, Lady Ashford cornered me in the powder room. "I need to tell you something," she said, dropping all pretense of civility, "about Caroline. I know what happened. You know what the coroner ruled. You don't know what I saw." She gripped my arms, her perfectly manicured nails digging through silk. "Caroline came to me 3 weeks before she died. She was covered in bruises, not from rough sex, from punishment, from being hurt deliberately, systematically. She told me everything, how he'd trained her to accept pain, how she couldn't sleep without him hurting her first, how she'd lost herself completely and didn't know how to find her way back." My stomach twisted. "I told her to leave," Lady Ashford continued. "I offered her money, a place to stay, legal protection. She refused, said she couldn't leave him, that she needed him more than she needed to survive. Tears filled her eyes. 2 weeks later, she walked into that lake. The police said it was an accident. But I know better. She chose death over continued submission. Why are you telling me this? Because you're wearing her dress, sleeping in her house, falling into the same trap. She released me, stepped back. Run, girl. Run now, before you can't anymore, before he makes you need him the way she did. I stood alone in the bathroom after she left, staring at my reflection, Caroline's dress, my face, our merged identity, and felt reality crack. I packed at midnight, quietly, systematically, everything I'd brought. I'd leave in the morning, tell him it was over, accept whatever consequences came. Arrest, deportation, ruined career, anything was better than becoming Carolyn 2.0. But when I opened my bedroom door, he was there, leaning against the frame, waiting. Going somewhere? His voice was soft, dangerous. I'm leaving. Tomorrow. Tonight. Now. I couldn't stop my hands from shaking. This is insane. You're insane. I'm not staying in this house one more second. He looked past me to my packed bag, then back to my face. You're not leaving because you want to. You're leaving because you're terrified of what you want. I want to survive. No. He entered my room and I backed away instinctively. You want to feel, to explore, to discover your own capacity for intensity. But you're afraid that wanting those things makes you broken, like Caroline, like me. Don't do this. I've been patient, Kalila. He kept advancing, and I kept retreating until my back hit the wall. I've given you space, time, information. I showed you Caroline's journal. Let you meet my world. Demonstrated exactly what I am. And you're still here. Still hungry for more. Still curious about the darkness. That's manipulation. It's honesty. He braced his hands on either side of my head, caging me against the wall. Not touching, just surrounding. I manipulated Caroline. She never knew when I was being genuine versus performing. But you see every move I make. You catalog every technique, and you're still drawn to it. Tears spilled down my cheeks. I hate you. Good. His face was inches from mine. Hate is honest. Hate is real. Hate means you feel something that isn't terror. Let me go. I will. His hand rose and I flinched, but he only wiped away my tears with surprising gentleness. I'll open the door, call you a taxi, never contact you again. You can walk away right now. His thumb traced my trembling lower lip. But you need to understand something first. I'm not keeping you here. Your own curiosity is. Your own hunger for something beyond the safe, boring, compressed life you've built. You don't know anything about me. I know you're brilliant, fierce, capable of surviving anything except mediocrity. His voice dropped to a whisper. I know you've spent your whole life being good. Good daughter, good student, good girl, who never took up too much space or demanded too much attention, and some part of you is dying from all that goodness. He was right. God help me, he was right. I don't want to be Caroline, I whispered. You won't be. Because Caroline was weak before I found her, and you're strong. Because Caroline needed someone to destroy her, and you need someone to challenge you. Because Caroline chose oblivion, and you choose consciousness. He leaned closer, his lips nearly touching my ear. Stay. Not because I'm forcing you. Not because you're afraid. But because you're curious about who you become when you stop performing goodness. And if I stay, then we negotiate. Boundaries, limits, safe words, all the things I didn't give Caroline. We explore your darkness consciously, safely, with full informed consent. He pulled back slightly, met my eyes. I won't break you, Kalila. I'll help you discover your own capacity for intensity. And when you've learned what you came here to learn, you'll leave whole. You promise? No. His honesty was devastating. I promise I'll try, that I'll be aware. That I'll stop if you ask, but I can't promise not to hurt you. Pain is part of growth. The question is whether the pain serves your evolution or my control. I should have pushed him away, should have run, should have chosen survival over discovery. Instead, I heard myself ask, "What happens if I say yes?" His smile was slow, triumphant, terrifying. "Then tomorrow, we begin your real education." I didn't sleep that night, neither did he. I could see light under his door across the hallway, hear him pacing the same way I was. At dawn, I made my choice. I unpacked my bag. 3 days later, I finished the painting. I'd worked obsessively, barely sleeping, fueled by something I couldn't name. Fear, desire, defiance, creativity, all mixed together into jet fuel. The restoration was flawless, perfect. The tear invisible, the colors matched exactly, the brushstrokes identical to the original master's technique. I signed my name in the bottom corner, small, discreet, permanent. Kalila Adebayo, proof I existed, proof I'd created something beautiful even in this dark place. When Alexander entered the studio that morning, he stopped dead, staring at the canvas. For a long time, he said nothing. Then, "It's perfect." "Yes. Better than the original, actually. You've improved the shadowing in the fabric." He moved closer, studying my signature, and something flickered across his face. Pride? Regret? "You fulfilled your debt, Kalila. You're free to go." The words should have been liberation. They felt like abandonment. "What if I don't want to go?" He turned to me and his expression was carefully neutral. "We agreed. 2 weeks. The painting restored. Debt paid. We also agreed to explore my darkness. You said we'd negotiate boundaries. That was 3 days ago. Before you understood what it meant, before you saw..." He gestured vaguely toward the east wing. "Before you knew what I did to Caroline." "I know exactly what you did. I read every word of her journal. I talked to Lady Ashford. I saw the photographs." I moved closer to him, surprising myself with my boldness. "And I'm still here, still curious, still wanting something. Kalila, I'm not Caroline." My voice was stronger than I felt. "I don't need you to destroy me. I need you to challenge me, to help me discover the parts of myself I've been suppressing my entire life. The ambitious parts, the demanding parts, the parts that want intensity and power and darkness. And you think I can give you that safely?" "No," I met his eyes, "but I think you'll try. And I think the attempt is worth the risk." He studied me for a long moment, and I saw the war in his expression. Desire versus responsibility, hunger versus guilt, the predator versus the man trying to be better. Finally, he said, "The lake. Come with me." We walked through the gardens in silence, past manicured lawns and wild roses, down a sloping path to where the water waited. The lake was bigger than I'd imagined, black water reflecting gray sky, surrounded by weeping willows that trailed their branches in the shallows. A small dock extended into the darkness, and at its end, I could just make out, a memorial. Flowers, stones, Caroline's name carved into wood. "This is where she died," Alexander said unnecessarily. "I know. I need you to understand what happened. The truth. Not the coroner's version or Lady Ashford's speculation, the actual truth." He walked onto the dock, and after a moment, I followed. Our footsteps echoed on old wood, at the end, surrounded by dark water. He finally spoke. "Caroline was sick when I met her, clinically depressed, suicidal. She'd been hospitalized twice for attempts before we even started dating." His voice was clinical, detached. "I should have recognized that as a red flag, should have encouraged her to continue therapy, take her medication, get proper help. Instead, I saw an opportunity." "For what?" "To act out my own damage, to recreate the dynamic my father created with me. Control through fear, intimacy through pain, love as domination." He stared at the water. "I didn't just take advantage of her vulnerability, I cultivated it, deepened it, made her dependency on me absolute." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you need to know what you're inviting into your life." He turned to me. "Caroline came to me 3 weeks before she died, said she wanted to leave. I convinced her to stay, not through threats or manipulation, through honesty. I told her I was broken, that I'd broken her, that she deserved better. And she said," his voice cracked, "she said she'd rather be broken with me than whole with anyone else." The confession hung in the cold air. The night she died, we fought. About her dependency, about my control, about whether love could exist in the twisted thing we'd created. I told her no, that what we had wasn't love. It was mutual destruction disguised as passion. She accused me of being incapable of real feeling. I agreed and listed clinically every manipulation I'd used on her, every calculated moment, every manufactured crisis designed to make her need me. And then she walked out. I watched from the library window as she walked down here, onto this dock into the water. I thought she'd turn back. People always turn back from the edge. He closed his eyes. She didn't. She just kept walking until the water covered her head, until she was gone. You didn't try to stop her? No. The word was flat. Because I thought she was playing out the pattern we'd established. Dramatic gesture, near drowning, me saving her, mutual reconciliation through crisis. We'd done it before. She'd threatened suicide as manipulation. I'd provided rescue as control. It was our dance. But this time it was real. This time it was real. He opened his eyes, and they were devastated. I realized too late, ran down here, dove in, pulled her out, called emergency services, performed CPR until they arrived. But she was gone. Had been gone for minutes before I even understood she wasn't acting. I didn't know what to say. There was nothing to say. The coroner was kind, he continued, said she'd had alcohol in her system, that she'd likely slipped, that her history of depression suggested accident rather than suicide, saved me from questions, saved her family from shame. But I know the truth. She chose to die. She chose to escape me. His laugh was bitter, which amounts to the same thing. I didn't push her into the water, but I pushed her to a place where death seemed preferable to continuing. That's murder by any moral standard, even if the law says otherwise. We stood in silence for a long time, the lake lapping gently at the dock's supports. Finally, I asked the question that mattered. Why did you let me find her journal? Why bring me here? Why tell me all this? Because you deserve informed consent. Because Caroline never had the full truth. Because he turned to me, and his expression was raw. Because I need you to understand that I can't promise not to hurt you. My nature is to control, to possess, to push boundaries until they shatter. 3 years of therapy hasn't fixed that. It's just made me aware of it. So this is you warning me off. This is me giving you the information you need to choose wisely. He moved closer. If you stay, if we explore this, I will hurt you. Not physically, I've learned that much, but psychologically. I'll find your vulnerabilities and press on them. I'll manufacture situations to test your strength. I'll push you toward your edges because that's what I do. And if I'm stronger than Caroline, then you'll survive me. You'll learn what you came here to learn and leave when you're ready. We'll both be damaged, but alive. He cupped my face with both hands. Or you leave now, and we both wonder what might have been. Your choice. Always your choice. I looked past him to the memorial, to Caroline's name carved in wood, to the dark water that had swallowed her whole. Then I looked back at him, this broken, dangerous, honest man who'd laid his worst self bare. I'm not leaving, I said. Kalila. But we're doing this differently, with rules, boundaries, safe words that you actually respect, therapy for both of us, and the moment I say stop, you stop. Completely. No negotiation, no manipulation, just stop. Hope flickered in his eyes. You're sure? No, but I'm curious. And apparently, curiosity is stronger than self-preservation. He kissed me then, first time, finally, and it was nothing like I'd imagined. Not aggressive or possessive, gentle, almost tentative, like he was asking permission with every movement. When we broke apart, he whispered, "Thank you." For what? For being strong enough to demand better, for not accepting the broken thing I offered Caroline, for making me try to be someone worthy of you. We walked back to the house hand in hand, leaving Caroline's memorial behind, carrying her memory forward. That night, in the library where we'd had our first real conversation, I laid out my terms. First rule, honesty. Always. I need to know when you're manipulating me, even if it kills the moment. He nodded. Agreed. Second, therapy. For both of us, together and separately. I need to understand my own patterns, and you need to continue working on yours. Already scheduled. Third, I keep my own life, my studies, my friends, my apartment in London. This doesn't consume my entire identity. Of course. Fourth, safe words. 3 of them. Yellow for slow down, red for stop completely, and I paused, gathering courage. Green for yes, more, I'm choosing this consciously. His eyes darkened. Green, I like that. And fifth, this was the hard one. If I become Caroline, if I start losing myself, you let me go. No fighting, no convincing, no grand gestures. You just release me. He was quiet for a long time. Then, I promise, if you start drowning, I'll let you swim away instead of pulling you deeper. Okay then. I took a breath. So what happens now? Now we negotiate the specifics. What you want to explore. What I want to explore. Where our desires intersect and where they diverge. He poured 2 glasses of whiskey, handed me one. Tell me, Kalila, what parts of your darkness are you most curious about? We talked until dawn. About power, about surrender, about the difference between submission and subjugation, about my hunger to be seen completely, not as a good girl or a scholarship charity case, but as a complex woman capable of darkness and light simultaneously. About his need for control, yes, but also his fear of repeating history. His desire to give me something Caroline never had, agency within intensity. We didn't sleep together that night, just talked, negotiated, built a framework for mutual exploration that honored both our damage and our desire for growth. As the sun rose, he asked, "Are you frightened?" "Terrified," I admitted. "Good. Fear keeps you honest, alert, present." He took my hand. "Let's begin." 6 months later, I stood in a Shoreditch gallery surrounded by my art, champagne in hand, and tried not to scan the crowd for him. He'd said he'd come. Then again, he'd said a lot of things. My exhibition was titled Anatomy of Complicity, mixed media pieces exploring power dynamics, feminine agency, and the seductive nature of subjugation. The centerpiece was a diptych I'd painted during our time together, Ravenshurst Estate in daylight and darkness. One panel showed the mansion pristine, beautiful, seductive. The other showed it rotting from within, gorgeous decay hiding structural collapse. Critics loved it, called it unflinching and brutally honest, said I was an important new voice in contemporary art, if they only knew. I saw him before he saw me, standing at the back of the gallery dressed in casual clothes instead of his usual formal wear. He looked smaller somehow, more human, still devastating, but no longer untouchable. For 10 minutes, he studied my work without approaching. I watched him process each piece, seeing himself reflected in my art, recognizing the story I'd told without naming him. When he finally reached the diptych, he stood for a long time, just staring. Then he turned, and our eyes met across the crowded room. I didn't look away. Neither did he. Eventually, he approached. "Permission to speak to the artist?" "Granted." Up close, I could see the changes, lines around his eyes that hadn't been there. Gray in his hair spreading, but also a softness, a openness. He looked less like a predator and more like a person. "You made me a metaphor," he observed, gesturing at the diptych. "You were always a metaphor, for the seductive nature of subjugation, for the ways we're drawn to our own destruction." I sipped my champagne. "Thank you, by the way." "For what?" "For being exactly what I needed to confront, my attraction to my own erasure. Every woman in my family taught me to make myself smaller for men's comfort. You offered to finish the job. I chose differently." He smiled slightly. "You're welcome, though I'm not sure I should be thanked for almost destroying you." "You didn't almost destroy me. You showed me the destruction I was already courting. That's different." We moved away from the crowd, toward a quieter corner of the gallery. "I've been in treatment," he said quietly, "twice weekly. Trauma-focused therapy, not just talk. My therapist, Dr. Chen, you'd like her, says I use desire as reenactment of my childhood abuse. that I'm simultaneously my father and the child I was, controlling others to feel powerful over my powerless past. That sounds accurate. She also says, he paused, gathering courage. She says I chose you specifically because you were strong enough to leave, that on some subconscious level I was asking to be stopped, that surviving Caroline's death gave me the capacity to recognize strength in others. I absorbed this, so I was your test case for redemption. You were my opportunity to practice being better, and you made me rise to the occasion instead of descending to my worst. He looked at me with something like awe. You demanded better. You set boundaries. You left when you needed to leave. You saved yourself, and in doing so, probably saved me too. I didn't save you, Alexander. I just refused to drown with you. Same thing from my perspective. We stood in comfortable silence, watching people admire my art born from our mutual darkness. Are you seeing anyone? I asked, surprising myself with my boldness. Yes, actually. Another trauma survivor. We're working through our damage together, very carefully. Lots of communication, explicit consent. It's excruciating and necessary. He paused. You? I dated a professor for 3 months. Kind, gentle, safe, bored me to tears. I laughed. Then a poet, also kind, also boring. I'm starting to think I'm fundamentally drawn to intensity, just not destruction. There's a difference. I'm learning that. I finished my champagne. I'm applying for a residency in Lagos next year, going home for a while. Need to reconnect with my roots, my family, myself outside of Western institutions. That sounds perfect for you. Genuine happiness in his voice. You'll create brilliant work there. What about you, still at Ravenshurst? Actually, I'm selling it. Too many ghosts. Caroline's family is buying it. They want to turn it into a women's mental health retreat. Poetic, really. He smiled sadly. I'm moving to Edinburgh, starting over, smaller house, no history, just possibility. Good for you. We'd run out of words. Everything important had been said. As I turned to rejoin my guests, he caught my hand, gently, briefly, letting go immediately. Kalila? Yes? I'm proud of you, of this, of who you've become. His voice was thick with emotion. Thank you for not letting me break you. Thank you for not trying as hard as you could have. I walked away, back to my opening, my success, my life that I'd built from the ashes of our almost disaster. Behind me, I heard him leave. 2 weeks later, we met for coffee. Neutral territory, a busy cafe in Notting Hill, morning light, other people everywhere. No intensity, no performance, just 2 people trying to be honest. I owe you an apology, he started. You've already apologized. Not adequately, not for everything. He wrapped his hands around his coffee cup. I manipulated you from the moment I saw you at the museum. The painting damage, the blackmail, even leaving Caroline's door open, all calculated to draw you deeper into my orbit. You deserved better. I accept your apology, but I don't absolve you. You have to live with what you nearly did to me, just like you live with Caroline. I know. We talked for 3 hours. About his father, a duke from an older generation who believed discipline meant cruelty, who'd educated Alexander through beatings and sexual boundary violations, framed as preparation for responsibility. About his realization, in therapy, that he'd spent his adult life recreating that dynamic, becoming the abuser to feel powerful over his own powerless childhood. About Caroline's family history, depression running through generations, suicide attempts before they had even met, her seeking him out specifically because she needed someone to finish what she'd started. About my own patterns, performing gratitude for white institutions, calculating safety constantly, exhausting myself through vigilance, making myself small to survive systems designed to crush women like me. By the end, we weren't healed, but we were honest. I miss you, he admitted, not the version I tried to create, the real you who refused to become my fantasy. I miss the intensity, I confessed, but I don't trust it anymore. I know now that intensity without safety is just danger in attractive clothing. That's wisdom. That's trauma. He laughed, genuine, surprised. Same thing, maybe. We agreed to meet quarterly. Coffee, gallery visits, updates on our respective therapies and lives. Not as lovers or friends exactly, as witnesses to each other's capacity for damage and growth. Accountability partners, I suggested. I like that. He stood to leave, then paused. One more thing. I'm writing a book. About Caroline, about my father, about the cycle of abuse. My therapist thinks it might help others recognize the patterns. Will you name me? Only if you consent, and only with details changed. I'll think about it. He nodded, respecting my boundary, and left. I sat alone, finishing my coffee, and felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peaceful. 1 year after I'd left Ravenshurst, I returned. My choice, my timing, my terms. Alexander had kept his word about everything. The estate was sold. Caroline's family had indeed turned it into a women's mental health retreat, poetic justice for the house that had broken her. He'd moved to Edinburgh, to a modest townhouse overlooking the sea. He was still in therapy, still seeing that woman, Claire, I'd learned, a domestic violence survivor working through her own demons. But before the sale finalized, he'd asked if I wanted to see it one last time. I'd said yes. The house looked different with afternoon light flooding in. Mrs. Brennan was gone, retired to the coast. The furniture was mostly packed. The east wing had been demolished entirely, replaced with a garden where Caroline's memorial stood. I had landscape architects redesign it, Alexander explained as we walked through the memorial garden. Wanted something that honored her memory without preserving my guilt shrine. Caroline's name was carved on a simple stone bench, surrounded by roses, yellow ones which her journal had mentioned were her favorite. A small plaque read, "For those who didn't survive their darkness, may others find light." We sat on the bench together, comfortable silence between us. "I'm glad you came," he said eventually. "Me too. Needed closure, to see that you actually changed things instead of just talking about it." "Fair," he paused. "I brought you something, found it while packing." He handed me a small box. Inside, a skeleton key, ornate and old. "What's this?" "The key to the east wing. I was going to give it to you the day you left. Symbolic gesture, control handed over, all that. But you left before I could." He smiled slightly. "I've been carrying it for a year. Figured you might want it now. Reminder that you always held your own keys, even when I tried to convince you otherwise." I turned the key over in my hands. Heavy, real, mine. "Thank you. Keep it, throw it away, whatever you need." We sat for a while longer, then walked through the empty house one last time. I showed him where I'd worked in the studio, where I'd paced at night, where I'd made the decision to leave instead of drown. In the conservatory, where we'd first negotiated, first circled each other, we stopped. "Do you regret it?" he asked. "Any of it?" I thought carefully before answering. "I regret how much of myself I was willing to sacrifice. I regret the nights I couldn't sleep, the fear, the manipulation I accepted. But I don't regret learning my own strength. I don't regret discovering I can be drawn to intensity without being consumed by it. So, no, not ultimately." "I regret it," he said quietly. "All of it. What I did to Caroline, what I nearly did to you. The years I spent perfecting destruction instead of pursuing healing." He turned to me. "But I'm grateful you survived me, that your story ended differently than hers." Me too. As I prepared to leave, really leave, finally completely, I turned at the door. "Alexander?" "Yes?" "Thank you for not becoming my monster." He smiled, sad, genuine, human. "Thank you for not becoming my victim." I drove away from Ravenshurst Estate for the last time, watching it shrink in my rearview mirror until it disappeared. I kept the skeleton key, not to use, just to remember. To remember that I'd walked into darkness and walked back out. To remember that desire doesn't equal destiny. To remember that some wounds we choose consciously, examining them in full light, accepting the scar as proof of survival rather than shame. 3 months later, I was in Lagos, painting, living, reconnecting with family, building a life that wasn't defined by his darkness or anyone else's. The skeleton key sat on my studio shelf, gathering dust, a reminder of the woman I'd almost become and the woman I'd chosen to be instead. Sometimes I thought about him, wondered if he was still in therapy, still seeing Claire, still working to be better. Sometimes I missed the intensity, the challenge, the way he'd seen parts of me I'd spent my whole life hiding. But mostly, I painted. I created beauty from darkness. I took up space without permission. I survived. And that, surviving with selfhood intact, was the truest victory possible. I received an email from an unfamiliar address. Subject line, "Thought you should know." The message contained a link to a published article. Alexander's book had been released. It was getting serious critical attention, prompting conversations about abuse, control, and the long-term effects of childhood trauma. Reviews called it unflinching, necessary, and a rare instance of an abuser taking genuine accountability. I bought a copy, read it in one sitting. He'd named me Layla and changed identifying details, but I recognized our story. More importantly, he'd told the truth about his manipulation, his calculated cruelty, his near destruction of me. He'd also included my resistance, my strength, my ultimate refusal to drown. The final chapter was titled, "Choosing Life." It ended with this: Layla saved herself, and in doing so, showed me that survival was possible. Not redemption, I don't believe I deserve that, but the possibility of causing less harm, of being conscious of my capacity for destruction and choosing, daily, not to exercise it. If you recognize yourself in Caroline's story, please know, her ending doesn't have to be yours. If you recognize yourself in Layla's strength, please know, that strength was always yours. The predator didn't give it to you. He just provided the circumstances for you to discover it. And if you recognize yourself in my patterns, the need to control, to possess, to dominate, please seek help before you destroy someone you claim to love. Awareness isn't enough. Action is required. Daily, exhausting, humble action. We are all capable of darkness. The question is whether we choose to examine it or indulge it. Choose examination. Choose consciousness. Choose survival. Choose life. I closed the book and sat in my Lagos studio, surrounded by my paintings, and cried. Not for what we'd been, for what we'd almost been, and what we'd both chosen instead. That evening, I responded to his email. Thank you for telling the truth. Thank you for doing the work. Thank you for letting me go when I needed to go. I hope you're well. I hope you continue choosing consciousness, and I hope, someday, you forgive yourself as much as I've forgiven you. K. His response came an hour later. Thank you for reading, for surviving, for showing me there was another way. I hope Lagos is everything you need it to be. A. That was the last time we communicated. I kept the skeleton key, kept his book, kept the paintings I'd created from our mutual darkness, not as shrines to pain, but as evidence of choice, evidence that we can be drawn to darkness and still walk toward light, evidence that survival is an act of defiance, evidence that some love stories end not with forever, but with both people choosing to become better versions of themselves apart. That's how this story ends. Not with happily ever after, not with tragic destruction, but with two damaged people who met at their worst, saw each other clearly, and chose, consciously, painfully, courageously, to walk away and heal. Separately, survivingly, wholly.